Hi guys. Thanks for tuning in, I guess, to my lesson demo. Uh, so what I'm doing is, first of all, this is for a first year comp class for freshmen or, just freshman age people. And it's a combination of a free write and a peer review. And just to sort of iterate from the beginning, the end goal of this is that this is all leading into the personal narrative, which is their first assignment. So this is one of a couple of days, a couple of activities that you would do just to sort of get them familiarized with what the process for that what the short composition process for that is going to be like. So it's a flash write and a peer review that uses Edward Hopper's Nighthawks painting as sort of a jump off for the flash write, which I'm just going to tack through this packet that I uploaded. If you want to print it out and follow along, that's great. If you don't, that's also great. That's your prerogative. So I'm gonna say, so the goals of this. So first of all, I'm gonna do this. This is the way I'm gonna do this. I'm going to have portions of this where I'm directly talking to you guys, the tribe, as it were, and then I'm going to sort of go into teacher mode where I will sort of perform as if I am addressing a classroom full of students and not just alone in my dirty apartment. So we're going to see how that goes. So just to sort of give you guys a little bit of introduction, the goals of this are they're pretty simple, but there's sort of three main things that I would hope would come out of this, and I have not tried this in the classroom yet. The idea is in one part. Excuse me. So from the first day, I've been familiarizing the students with the idea that writing is this long, sometimes arduous, soul-searching, immersive process that Rome wasn't built in a day. And it's going to take some time and a lot of drafting and a lot of revision for them to get to their final product, their final assignment, their final draft. So the first part of this is to just I'm going to be using an excerpt from Anne Lamott's book Bird by Bird called Shitty First Drafts, which I'll get to more of that later. So that part of it is just to sort of reiterate to them that the early drafting is a free-for-all, and the first draft of everything sucks, and to just sort of reacquaint them with that. I don't think you can really acquaint writers with that enough. I've been doing this for a long time, and I still stress out for every first draft of anything. So that's the first goal. The next goal, I am very detail-oriented. I think that it's tough a lot of the time to get students thinking in terms of details and applying those details to a narrative and to a story or to whatever it is they're doing. This could be, details are important in argumentative essays and deliberative essays and all kinds of different writing. So I'm hoping to sort of get them focusing on details, focusing on narrative, focusing on perspective and storytelling modes. All of those are important for all kinds of writing, especially important for the personal narrative, this is sort of a vamp into. And so this is just a low-stakes way to get them thinking about all of that stuff. The third goal here, and it's admittedly imperfect, I'll have a coda at the end here where I sort of admit to parts of this that are maybe not working quite well yet. But the exercise includes a sort of practice run at a peer review, which they have a graded peer review for the personal narrative. And this peer review the short version that they do for this exercise is kind of a truncated version of the peer review, almost the same sheet that they will be basing their peer review for the personal narrative off of. It's got a very similar set of goals and directions. So I think it's just a good kind of low-stakes way for them to familiarize themselves with this process before we sort of get into stuff that's a little bit more there's a little bit more weight attached to it. So that's sort of my goal end of things. For necessary materials, all you need is this, a copy of Shitty First Drafts. It's like a chapter from this really a great book by Lamott called Bird by Bird. It's kind of one of thousands and thousands of writers writing about writing, instructional manual type books. But this section in particular, I think, is really funny. It's really approachable, and it's really short, which for reading aloud in class is obviously good. You need an image of Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, projected, I would say, is the best way to do that. I guess you could print it out and give everyone their own copy, but just project it. And then the sample peer review sheet, which I will go over more later. Whatever, I'm sure everybody has their own peer review process, and I'm sure they're all kind of similar. But and then the students are just going to need a notebook, like their writer's notebook, paper, and just something to write with. So now I'm going to get into the lesson directions part of this. So again, I'm going to sort of give you guys an intro and then pretend to be a teacher for a second and then come back and we're going to just kind of slog through this together. So the first part of this is to distribute this Lamott excerpt, because the first part of the exercise is to read it aloud in class. So just pass it out and then just contextualize it in terms of first draft messiness, but also the first draft messiness, but also sort of getting them acquainted with the review and revision process, which Lamott does touch on in this. So now I'm going to be a teacher for a second. So I've just passed out this Lamott article. Does everybody have it? Okay, good. So what I want to do is read through this together, just to make sure that we're hitting all the notes and that we're all kind of in lockstep as we move forward. I like this article because it's approachable, it's easy, the prose is unfussy, and it's short enough for us to read together. And I think that she has a few really, really good cogent points about the first draft process and then the process moving on from those terrible first drafts that absolutely everybody writes. So what I want to do here is we're just going to take our time and we're going to read through this together. I guess if you were in the classroom, you could popcorn this or whatever, or you could just read it. So so let's all just read through this together, and then we'll just kind of talk about it a little bit before we move on. So for the purposes of this, to keep myself from getting too long-winded, I'm going to read, I've timed myself reading this. It takes like about 8 minutes or so. So I imagine in the classroom it would probably take a little longer. But I'm just going to read like maybe the first couple paragraphs and then the conclusion, just so you can kind of get the gist of it. I will upload this as well, obviously. So if you want to go ahead and read the whole thing, it's really good. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and read some. In the following selection, taken from Mott's popular book about writing, Bird by Bird, she argues for the need to let go and write those, quote, shitty first drafts, unquote, that lead to clarity and sometimes brilliance in our second and third drafts. Now, practically even better news than that of short assignments is the idea of shitty first drafts. All good writers write them. This is how they end up with good second drafts and terrific third drafts. People tend to look at successful writers who are getting their books published and maybe even doing well financially and think that they sit down at their desks every morning feeling like $1 million, feeling great about who they are and how much talent they have and what a great story they have to tell. That they take a few deep breaths, push back their sleeves, roll their necks a few times to get the cricks out, and dive in, typing fully formed passages as fast as a court reporter. But this is just the fantasy of the uninitiated. I know some very great writers you love, who write beautifully and have made a great deal of money, and not one of them sits down routinely feeling wildly enthusiastic and confident. Not one of them writes elegant first drafts. All right, one of them does, but we do not like her very much. We do not think that she has a rich in her life, or that God likes her, or can even stand her. Although when I mentioned this to my priest friend, Tom, he said you can safely assume you've created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates all people the same as you do. Hates all the same people you do. That's, yeah, don't make that mistake. It's very dark, but, you know. Very few writers really know what they are doing until they've done it. Nor do they go about their business feeling dewy and thrilled. They do not type a few stiff, warm-up sentences and then find themselves bounding along like huskies across the snow. One writer I know tells me that he sits down every morning and says to himself nicely, "It's not like you don't have a choice, because you do. You can either type or kill yourself." We all often feel like we are pulling teeth, even those writers whose prose ends up being the most natural and fluid. The right words and sentences do not come pouring out like ticker tape most of the time. Now, Muriel Spark is said to have felt that she was taking dictation from God every morning. Sitting there, one supposes, plugged into a dictaphone, typing away, humming. But this is a very hostile and aggressive position. One might hope for bad things to rain down on a person like this. For me, and most of the other writers I know, writing is not rapturous. In fact, the only way I can get anything written at all is to write really, really shitty first drafts. Now I'm going to skip to the last paragraph. Almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting something, anything, down on paper. A friend of mine says that the first draft is the down draft. You just get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You fix it up. You try to say what you have to say more accurately. And the third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth to see if it's loose or cramped or decayed or even, God help us, healthy. So after you're done reading through that, you would kind of bring everyone back and just discuss it a little bit. What they think is, what resonates with them about what Lamont has to say, what maybe they don't agree with, what they're confused about, what they have questions about. Just get their reactions. It's pretty straightforward, so I can't imagine there would be too much confusion, but a lot of times there is. So just take time to check in with them and make sure that they're cool about that. So the next thing is to introduce the Hopper painting. I have uploaded this as well, although I imagine everybody has at least seen it, or at least kind of knows it's the kind of diner scene, kind of Twilight-y, and just people sitting in a diner at night. And I think it's even for, maybe not for middle schoolers, but I would say even high schoolers, most of them have probably at least seen it. It's a pretty ubiquitous cultural artifact by now, and it's been parodied a lot too. So maybe they've even just seen a parody of it, which counts. So what you would do is project the painting and just get everybody's first impressions, what they notice about it at first glance, just kind of what seems to be going on. And if you want to give some background on Hopper, that usually interests people and kind of gets them sort of to wake up a little bit. So then what's important about this part is, as a class, you would together you would sort of look at the image and pick out what are sort of the best details from it, or not the best details, but the most noticeable details, which it's a very rich, colorful painting that has a lot of like great ambiance and there's a lot going on in such a still scene, which is, I think, part of why the painting is so resonant. So, I mean, and I'm talking about details like what color suit is the man wearing, how are the people situated, this man and woman are sitting next to each other, are they together, are they not, the man is alone, is he waiting for somebody, what time of day is it, what color is the street light giving off, what color is the diner, what color the man behind the counter's uniform? Things like that, sort of very kind of sensory things, like what are they noticing about the painting? And then you can sort of expand outward into kind of ambiances and just the general mood that they're getting from the painting. All of this is important, and important to note. As you're gathering these details and what they notice and everything, you write it down on the board, because for the flash write, you would encourage them to use what they have discovered and what sort of the word bank you've gathered on the board to take forward into their flash write. So you're gathering and you're writing it on the board, and just kind of coming up with unique details that students can use as a jumping off point, and just encourage them to sort of keep thinking in detailed terms. The next part is to introduce the flash write. I'm using the term, I should say, I'm using the term flash write to differentiate from free writing, just because I think that, and by this point, the students have already done done plenty of free writing, so they should be familiar with the process. But with free writing, I feel like it's just whatever you want to create. Like, here's whether it's prompt based or whether it's not. Just take a minute to write anything down. Don't stop. If it's a poem, if it's nonfiction, if it's what you ate for breakfast, if it's a story, it could anything you want. If it's a list of shit in your apartment, like anything. For this writing exercise, I want them to do specific things. I want them to write a narrative. I want them to tell a story. I want them to include details from a specific source. I want them to inhabit one of a few specific perspectives, which I'll get to in a second. So that's just explaining why I'm not using the term free writing. I'm using flash writing. It's like the same thing, but it's a little bit more specifically goal oriented. So that's that. So yeah, introducing the flash write, just make sure there's two main things that I want them to do with this. First of all, I want them to focus on details, and we've just spent all that time gathering details on the board as a jumping off point. If they want to use those, they can. If they have other stuff they want to talk about, that's cool too. The other thing is what I think is good about the Hopper painting for this exercise is that there are four characters, there are four figures in the painting. There's the guy working behind the counter, there's the man, the solo figure, the guy with like the suit and the hat that's sitting at the counter, and then sort of across from him are a man and a woman. And then, so there are those four figures, and then a fifth perspective that I offer them is the perspective of like a passerby, or just a bystander, some other person that is noticing this scene. Maybe it's somebody who's going to meet one of the people in the cafe. Maybe it's just somebody who's walking. Maybe it's the milkman, the garbage man. Like somebody who's walking by, somebody who is not specifically in the scene, in the diner, cafe, whatever, but is someone that is nearby. So they have those 5 choices, and I want them to pick one of those POVs and write from that. Inhabit that perspective, tell the story from that perspective. So I suppose I won't do the classroom portion because I just kind of did it, but I will anyway. So now that we've looked at the Hopper painting, what I want you guys to do for this flash write is, we've just got done talking about how there are 4 figures in the painting, and there's the sort of the 5th kind of wild card perspective that you could inhabit if you want to. I want you, the only things that there's kind of 3 things that I really need you to do for this flash write. The first thing is tell a narrative story. No poems for this one, no lists for this one. Just to try your best to sort of tell a story with the way that we've talked about narrative arc and all of those things. Try your best to hit those beats. So one is tell a story. Two is to incorporate as many details as you can. Feel free to use these ones. Here's my board over here. Feel free to use these ones on the board if you want to, as many or as few of them as you want. If you notice other things about the painting, go for it. Just kind of let your imagination run wild a little bit. And then the third thing that I need you guys to do is to just make sure that you are inhabiting one of those POVs. Stay in that POV. And besides that, it's really, I just want you guys to sort of run wild with it. So what we're going to do, oh, and also, this is low stakes, this is practice, and this is also going to be private, except for the person that's going to be peer reviewing you. So one person is going to see it, but I'm not expecting you to share any of this if you don't want to. There will be time at the end if you want to. That would be fantastic. So what we're going to do, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes to do this flash writing exercise. Just please try to remember, we talked about sustaining momentum. Just if you get stuck, please just try and do your best to plow through it. Just try to tell that story. I'll be walking around. If you guys need me, flag me down. So 10 minutes, off you go. So 10 minutes goes by, they're writing. After that 10 minutes, what you want to do then is bring everybody back and then introduce this peer review sheet, which I've also attached. Again, as I mentioned before, this is very similar to what they're going to get for their personal narrative peer review sheet. So, why don't I just do like the class? So in the classroom again. All right, guys. So time is up for your flash write. What we're going to do next is, as I've said before, we're going to have a graded peer review section for the personal narrative for every assignment, but for the personal narrative coming up, this will not be graded. But it's important for you guys to understand that this is very similar to the peer review guidelines and goals for the peer review for the personal narrative. So what I want you to do is turn to the person next to you, exchange papers, and go through this bit by bit. I'm going to introduce it now, but I want you to try to make sure, I know that we don't have a ton of time left, but just make sure that you try and hit all these beats you can. Remember, this is just practice. This is just so that you guys can get eyeballs on this peer review sheet that's going to be similar to the one you're going to be seeing. Get used to the process of peer reviewing. We're going to be spending entire class periods doing this, but this is just for kicks, more or less. So just to go through this bit by bit, you want to start off with your name and the name of the person that you're critiquing, obviously, and then give so just for fun, try to give a 6-word summary of the story. Remember, we did the 6-word memoirs, so try to give me a 6-word summary of just what happens, the nuts and bolts of what happens. If you can't get it down to 6 words, don't knock your brains out trying to do it. Just give me as brief but as accurate a summary of what happens in your author's story as you can. And then list a few solid details the author included that made you feel like you were in the story with them. Now, these will probably be details from the board. They might not be. Just any sort of resonant details that you guys notice. Colors of things, positioning of things, what people say, what people do, what's going on in the scene, anything like that. List 1 or 2 noteworthy moments of narration where the author really inhabited their chosen POV. Again, so I wanted you to stick to one POV. Let me know how that's working. That sort of bleeds into the second part here. Is there a perspective in the piece? What about this perspective makes the story unique to that narrator? And if so, where? And for this section, I want you to include a quote. Just a couple of quotes from the story you're critiquing that you think the perspective, the POV they've chosen really comes alive in that moment. Was there anything that confused you? This could be anything. If you're confused about spatially, about narratively, about just anything at all. If there's anything that confuses you, it really helps the writer to know that. So please include that. Name one part of the story that you think the writer could expand on. Something interesting. This is a big part of the revision process. We get to, as Lamont said, she will, she said she'll start off with what's on her first page, and then when she's going back to do that second draft, she'll find a thing that's on the second page, some little something, and she'll think, oh, that's actually really where this story is going. Scrap the first part, start with the second part, and go again. So it's really helpful for the writer maybe to notice one part of the story that you think is really kind of firing on all cylinders, and then, maybe the writer can expand on that and maybe shrink parts that are not working so much. So just pick one thing. Grammar, don't get too hung up on that. But if you're noticing patterns of things, misspellings, mispunctuation, just note it, let them know about that. But this was a quick write, so don't get too hung up on that. And then what was your favorite part? Just include what worked best for you. Okay, so if there are no questions, we're going to go ahead. You're going to have another 10 minutes to peer review using this as guidance. So if you have any questions, just let me know. All right. So then they peer review for 10 minutes, and then that's pretty much it. Like it's sort of at the end. Then after that, of course, you bring everyone back and just sort of take the temperature of the room, see how everything is feeling to them. If they felt like this was fruitful, if they, this is also the point if they want to share something that they shared. I have sort of timed this out a little bit, and it gets a little tight because it's a 50-minute class. So the way I've timed this out, it takes like just about all of that 50 minutes to do all this, like with maybe 5-7 minutes to spare. If you're lucky, you have 7 minutes to spare, so you can really sort of reflect as a group on what happened. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that one of the shortcomings, and that sort of gets to what I was thinking about, this is, as an exercise, it's a little dicey. It's a little tight time-wise. It's kind of throwing a lot at them at once, and it's going to be challenging for a lot of students, but I think it's kind of supposed to be. But I will totally concede that it's, especially the peer review part, it's pretty quick. So this is an imperfect sort of schematic that could definitely use some rejiggering. If you guys have, you guys are always very insightful and very helpful. So if you have things that you think will work better for this, just let me know. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else. So take that and run with it if you want, or leave it here in Moodle land, whatever you want to do. But I want to thank you guys very, very much for everything, but for indulging me with this lesson. And I hope you guys have a very happy little Labor Day. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from the rest of you. So take care of yourselves.